So Ben Slick, you want to kick us off?
Welcome, everybody. Just glad to have everybody's participation. I know some of us are all cooped up inside working at home, and we'll take any diversion necessary away from Netflix, dogs, kids, and what a great time to catch up on some WeatherTRAK stuff. This administrative tools segment is going to be powerful for people who are in WeatherTRAK every day. Many of the things that you do here you can get through customer support, but our customers have asked us how they can self-manage, and so I think this will be a great introduction to that capability.
Outstanding. And again, for the record, I'd like to introduce our special guest this week, Marty Zidtowecki. Oh, I tripped over it. I practiced it 10 times, Marty.
You're doing great. There you go.
Right? Is that right?
Hi, everyone. There you did
Marty
it right. Thank you.
Joining us from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, where he is managing the parks down there and has been kind enough to offer us his perspective on the administrative tools and some other things we'll get to a little bit later in the webinar. Again, if you have questions throughout the webinar, Chris Manchuk is a co-founder and is manning the chat box. So if you guys have questions for Chris, please chat them in and he will do his best to bring some of those into the conversation and provide answers as best he can.
Hey Ben, hey Ben, one quick follow-up to the photodiode question since we started it.
Okay.
Someone asked if the HD flow sensor needs a power supply and if that's impacted.
No, it is the only flow solution that we have that requires that extra power pack is the photodiode. The HD iron has its own power supply. The HD plastic gets it from the line. So that it is the only place where we see an extra power pack necessary, and that's because of the photocell, or I call it the laser. I get yelled at by the engineers, but we got to power the photocell to make that reading. So it's the only place where we see that.
Great.
Okay. All right. So let's jump into the WeatherTRAK administrative tool. We're going to talk about how to manage your own WeatherTRAK access and permissions today. So I know what you're thinking. What are the WeatherTRAK administration tools and why have I never seen them? This is a great feature set for a lot of our users, but it's not something that a lot of users know about. And that's one thing we want to try and do on this weekly webinar, is not only answer the most frequently asked questions, but highlight some of the features that might be important to you that you don't even know exist. And that's really where this administration tools falls, right square in the middle of that, because the administration tools are a set of tools that allow a user to manage their own access for their WeatherTRAK controllers or single controller, depending on how many you manage. Now, like Ben Slick mentioned, this is something that customer support handles for 9/10 of our customers, right? Customer support is there to make sure that every user has the account set up and the access that they need to manage the controllers that they want. So the reason you've never seen this feature is because it's turned off by default. It's something that you have to ask to be added to your WeatherTRAK account before you'll have access to it. And that's because as we look at these administrative tools, the WeatherTRAK is a permissions-based system. That means this is our security feature. And as part of our network security, we set up an account for each WeatherTRAK user that identifies not only the sites and controllers that they should have access to, but also sets their permissions, which sets the features that they should have access to. So if you have a situation where you want to set somebody up with a view-only account where they can log in and see all your WeatherTRAK stuff but not make any changes, the WeatherTRAK administrative tools will help you do that for yourself and empower you to give you those tools. Again, customer service generally does the heavy lifting, but some users really like the direct interaction with their security features. So my goal for today is to walk you through those, show you exactly what it looks like and feels like to set up a WeatherTRAK user, assign them with proper access, get them the right accounts and sites and controllers, as well as the proper permissions, the levels of access that they will be using on their WeatherTRAK account. And then we'll wrap up by talking about how to become a network administrator. Like after I show you the features, I'll tell you how you can access them. Does that make sense? Chris Manchuk, any questions about where we're going?
A few questions here. I'm going to hold them till later. They're not related to this specific topic, but some good questions here for later.
Awesome. Okay. All right. So what we want to do, so again, what I'm going to do is jump into the demo where I show you how to set up a user, how to enable access, and how to set permissions. That will be today's major training content. Now, before we do, I want to talk about who this is valuable to, who this feature set really affects, and I'll just give you a couple of examples. We have a major retailer, one of our huge partners, who has a site administrator who manages all the access for all 1,700 sites that they manage around the country. And they have a single person who is in charge of making sure that they understand who has access to every site and eliminating users that don't need to be on there, eliminate the security risk. So they really find that having the power to do that for themselves and not having to bring customer service into the conversation is a powerful value add for their WeatherTRAK experience. And the same can be said for Marty, who's a great example of a city administrator who wants to be able to manage that on a daily basis without involving the customer service folks. I have large site managers who do this, a major NFL stadium, and it manages all of their property. And so for every subcontractor that comes in there and everybody who has to touch the system, he has the ability to add and subtract access from those users so he can control who can see his account. Now, very importantly, the folks that won't use this is our main customer base. Our contractors don't have access to this because you have to be the owner of the controller to authorize the permission. So a lot of times our contractors don't see this, but I think this will be an important training for them because it gives you a peek behind the curtain. It really lets you see what a WeatherTRAK user profile looks like and what you can imagine what your user profile looks like behind the scenes and understand what access and permissions your account has been given. So a lot of my contractors just like to see behind the curtain, and that's what we'll do today. Questions about that before we move on? Okay, then I'm just going to keep going. Now, what you are seeing here is the WeatherTRAK.net or WeatherTRAK Central. And the first time after you've been granted administrative permissions that you log in, you will now see this little admin tab. It will have been added to your WeatherTRAK account. So if you don't have administrative features, you don't have this little admin tab. So after you've been assigned, you'll see this admin tab and you'll click on it to take you to the admin tools. Now, in the admin tools, again, we're controlling our user permissions, our access and permissions. So what we want to do as part of the demo is set up a new user. To do this, we click on that users button, and you'll see as I click on that users button, here in the first part of the screen, let me shrink that down so you can see it. The first part of the screen in the upper right-hand corner, we have add new user. This little button will take you to a form that you fill out to create a WeatherTRAK user account. So very straightforward. We go in, we collect some basic user data, their name, their email address, their cell phone number, that kind of thing. And we create a WeatherTRAK account for that user. There is no cost to adding WeatherTRAK accounts. And again, this is something that generally runs through customer service. We're always happy to help you do that. But if you choose to do this for yourself, you can add new users to your account very easily. Now I'm going to jump to a demo account that's already been filled out. So if I go into this user account, you can start to see what it looks like behind the scenes. If I go into edit, it'll show you that same screen, show you all of the user information. And once you have a user set up, you would hit save, and that will save this profile and create this profile in the WeatherTRAK.net network. Okay, that's step one. I am going to jump back real quick. Stop share. Chris Manchuk, any questions about that so far?
I think you'll probably get to this, Ben, but a question came up on when adding a user, can you change the user type to admin? So if I'm an admin already, can I create another admin?
I will get there. The short answer is yes, and I'll show you how to do it when we get there, when we're talking about adding permissions. Okay, so I will jump back into this. Bam. All right, once we have created a user, and I'm just going to cancel out of this guy, once it will have saved through, you'll see a created user and this page. And this page shows that user account. And the first thing we want to do when we are setting up a user account is manage their access. And that happens here on the More tab. You can see here on the More tab that we've got accounts, sites, and controllers. So this is where we manage the access to what controllers that our users are going to be allowed to manage. Account level access means that we have access to all of the controllers in the account. So for Marty, as an example, Marty's got the city of Fort Lauderdale, and he's got account level access, which means that he can see all of the controllers that are on the city of Fort Lauderdale account. Now, you can have site level access, right? Which is designated site by site. So if Marty has a set of irrigation techs, each one can only or can be authorized to only see and manage the controllers and the sites that are theirs. So you can break up an account and give site level access, and you'll have access to all of the controllers on the site if you have site level access. And then all the way down to the granular level of controller access. We could do this one controller at a time. If you have a subcontractor that you want to give permission to run just for the duration of their project, you can add controller level access just to the controllers and stations that they need. So the first thing we do is go in and add, we'll add a site to this, for example. So I click on the sites and I see all of the sites that I have been authorized to manage inside this account. So I can go here and click on any site and drag it into this user's list. And these are all of the sites that this user has been accessed or has been allowed to access. I'll save that and pretend that we have gone through the process of adding accounts, sites, and controllers to this file. Any questions about adding access?
No.
All right, so let's talk about permissions. Now this is where the Backstage Pass gets very interesting to me. So we go here to our Access and Permissions tab, and you'll see for every account that I've been able to access, I can come in and edit the specific permissions of the features that I've been allowed to view and to manage. So I go into this specific account. In this case, I can go in and see that all of the different WeatherTRAK features have been broken down into different categories. I think of them as different buckets, right? Where we have the admin tool, for example. See, we have this permission box where initially your admin tool permissions will always be set to none. But if I use this drop-down box, I can absolutely go in and change the access level or the permissions level for this feature. So if I wanted to make this user an admin, I would add user rights to the admin tool. If I wanted to, in a different example, give somebody a view-only account where we pull all the save buttons out of their WeatherTRAK user experience so they can see anything but can't make any changes. We would go here to our controller pages where we have all of the program page and all of the essential irrigation stuff, and change that account from user to reader. And that would limit their access to these features. It limits their permissions and would only, again, allow a read-only WeatherTRAK account on those features. So this is where I think it gets very interesting. I think it's important to note that nobody has default access to the admin tool. We also have another one called Document Manager. We'll feature in another segment that nobody has access to, where you can hide and store all of your documents in the WeatherTRAK cloud. So we'll talk about that on another day. All right, good place to stop and ask. Do we have questions, Chris?
Got a couple here. So question came up, do you need to do this admin control for every property you add, or does it automatically load to the previous administrator?
Oh, good question. So let me, leads me right into where I need to be. As we finish the user details, if I go back to this users page, after I've gone through and, oh, too many users online right now. Bring up my user page. There we go. I can copy permissions. That's what this feature is about. I can just take the permission set and copy them from one site to another. So it is a manual process, but we have tools to make it efficient. And then the last thing that we want to do after we have created the user account, we have managed the access and permissions and added all of the sites and managed all of the permissions that user is going to have. We want to send them the welcome email, and this is an essential step. The welcome email will come from HydroPoint support, and inside it will say, welcome to WeatherTRAK, and in that email we'll have that user's username and temporary password. And then they'll use that temporary password to log in and set their own secure password. This is also a great feature to know about if a user has lost their password. You can just send them a new welcome email, and that will reset their password to the temporary password contained in that welcome email. So real quick, that's
and a couple more questions here.
Perfect.
Let's see. That would go. Is there a report that a contractor can request that shows all users on a site or account?
Yes, there absolutely is.
And their related permissions.
I don't know about that last twist, but I do know. I'll show you right here. If I go to WeatherTRAK.net. And go to the reports page. I think what you're looking for is the account security report. Right here in the once you are an administrator, you can pull that. It takes administrative features to have this report added to your file, but once you have administrative features, you can pull that. So not really for a contractor, but for a site administrator, absolutely.
And then is that something that if they don't have access to its administrator that our customer service would provide, or would they need permissions?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So any questions like that, anything you see on here that you might want, call and ask customer service how you can either get the report or get the features. Absolutely. That's what customer service is here for.
Another question's come up on permissions. Is it possible in permissions to restrict access to running manual watering only?
Yes, absolutely. That is how we walked through that process. If I turn off the controller pages or make the controller pages view only, it will, on both the WeatherTRAK central account and the WeatherTRAK mobile account that is issued to that user, it will not allow any programs changes, like you can find in both of those platforms, but it will allow all manual irrigation on those. So that's a great question.
And then also on removing a employee or user from the list, can that be done by an administrator, or how would that be done for an administrator and non-administrator?
That's exactly it. So you can't, what you would do is let me just reverse the process. You go into the admin tool, find that user. Sorry, I've got the spinning wheel of death kicking this morning. Go to that user account. Oh, it's still loading in. There we go. Go to that user account. Access the sites that they have permission to view and to manage, and then we would just pull all of those sites right off, right? And so I can go in here. You don't delete the account, but you pull all of the access away from it. So they can still log in, they just can't touch any controllers.
It's especially handy for landscapers when they gain a new account or decide not to service an account anymore, to have themselves added or removed to prevent any kind of accidental damage or liability that may be caused by a new landscape service provider, so that they don't get tagged for that problem.
Absolutely. And so the last stop on the tour is, how do I get these features? How do I add these features to my WeatherTRAK account? And there are certain protocols in place to make sure that we are protecting the security of our customers and still enabling them with all the features that they need. So to become a WeatherTRAK administrator, first you have to have permission from the owner of the controller. So whoever is paying the bill on that controller is considered the owner, and they have to sign off on you as an administrator. We also have to have account level access to whatever account that you want to manage. So you have to have the top level of access on that account to be able to manage these administrative features. And then finally, you have to meet with me, and I'll give you a 15-minute training on all the details that we didn't cover here today. Just there's still a little bit to it, not a lot more, but we do a formal training to make sure that we've signed off on all of the security of all of these.
Hey, Ben, one more question came up about, is there a log of actions done by a user that can be viewed? So I think they're talking about the change history report and how that's accessed. And is that admin only, or who can access that?
So the controller, exactly right. The controller settings change history report goes through all of the changes and puts the thumbprint on all of the changes, right? We see the user account that made all of those changes. So that is our most secure way of tracking those changes and seeing who's managing your systems, by all means. All right, Marty.
Yes, sir.
My question for you is, are you using these administrative features, and how are they helping you?
To be honest, I'm going to be perfectly honest. I learned a lot today on what you've showed me, and I'm definitely going to be using them more. I usually call in or email in what I need, but this will definitely help me, you know, with things that I could do at home if I want to change it at home and put in employees. We have about 12 irrigation techs and upper management personnel that want access, you know. So that's going to be incredible time saver for me. And thank you.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. I know that this feature, in my experience, is the biggest hit for people in your position, cities and school districts who want to have daily management and want to have access and view those security features and make sure that they know who has access to their sites is a big part of what we're doing today. Absolutely.
For sure. For sure.
Now, Marty, I break into my webinar format where
Yes.
I am going to, starting last week and continuing with you, I'm going to ask every guest, what does WeatherTRAK save you?
Well, I mean, to be honest, we've been working with you guys for almost a year now. What I can tell you, the customer support has been phenomenal. John Marshall and Rob and all you guys, if and when I have a problem or a question, what's amazing that you guys are always available. you know, and I really appreciate that. We have about 50 sites up online right now. We have another 50 to 75 in the works. And everything has been great. You know, besides having a remote control in my pocket and our crews saving time and being able to turn things on from home, our water savings and our dollar savings has just been incredible, more than we can expect.
Have you measured any of that savings, any dollar savings or water savings?
It's funny that you say that. Yes, we do actually. We sent something to the mayor of the city, and the commissioners came from the city manager, Chris Lagerbloom, and the report that was done from our department was our first 6 months, our average monthly bill before WeatherTRAK. Our consumption was about $84,000 a month in water, and using about 9,800,000 gallons a month, respectively. And after the installation of the sites, on an average of over the 6 months, our water consumption bills dropped to $58,000 and about 6 million gallons.
Whoa.
So what we're seeing so far is about $25,000 a month savings in water bills, which you know, comes directly out of our water budget, and saving, you know, 300,000 gallons of water a month, which is some big numbers. You know, we're super happy with WeatherTRAK.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that with us. That's amazing insight to what good water management can provide. And I know as much as anybody on the call that while we would love to take full credit for that, the management is a key part of that type of success. So
Yeah.
not only having the right technology, but having the right manager is the way
Right.
to achieve that. So
Yes.
great job.
Thank
The,
you.
the Floridian Aquifer thanks you.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
You know, I mean, we were thinking too, like what are we saving? Also, not even looking at like a water plant. You know, how much we're saving output for future growth for the water department, for them having to. Our growth is incredible in Florida, South Florida. So, you know, that probably is 2,000 or 3,000 homes that now they don't have to add a water plant to provide that. Now, you know, we save that instantly. So
That's amazing.
And that money isn't measurable, you know, for what it would cost for a water plant, you know. So really great. We really appreciate it, guys.
That's fantastic. One last thing I wanted to address with you, Marty. One thing I know is going on in your area is great rebates for not only smart controllers or weather-based controllers, but also flow monitoring. And this is not just true in Florida, but around the country. I'm wondering if you have used any of those incentive funds to help your project.
Not as yet. Not as yet. We have somebody looking into that from South Florida Water Management. So we're hoping to see, but I mean, with what we've spent, I mean, the city's really happy with continuing, not so much worrying about spending money with when we know we're saving it. And the labor savings as well, you know. I mean, when you get an alert that a solenoid's bad, you know, it's repaired the same day, you know. So that's incredible.
That's awesome. All right, guys, it's time for me to start wrapping this sucker up.
Can we lob in? Can we lob in a couple last questions here, Ben?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
The question was asked about WeatherTRAK Mobile, and do I have permission rights that I can set on WeatherTRAK Mobile similar to WeatherTRAK Central?
Absolutely. So the permissions page that we were looking at is true of both WeatherTRAK Central and WeatherTRAK Mobile. So anything that you add or defer access to, if there are features in either one of those platforms that tie to that, it references your permissions base. So just like we were talking about before, if I turn off the ability to change programs in your WeatherTRAK Mobile, you'll still have manual access, but you won't be able to go in and change the station settings from there.
Great. A couple quick questions off topic, but I know they're quick answers, so I'm going to lob them in there. Can can users use 14 gauge irrigation wire for our flow 3 wiring, or do you need to use shielded communication wire?
We always recommend using shielded cable unless you are using a flow link. Flow link is the only exception to that. Our best practice says that anytime you are wiring a flow sensor to any controller, you're using shielded cable as communication wire, not irrigation wire.
Okay. And then last one here, do the OptiFlow controllers need a grounding rod at installation in the enclosure?
I would ask you to ground every controller, yes, and not inside the enclosure. The sphere of influence, you want to put that grounding rod 8 feet away from your controller and run the grounding wire or grounding source, number 6 bare copper wire, to whatever your grounding source is.
All right. I think,
all right, so to wrap it up here, I know I'm running a minute late here, so if you have any more questions, please forward them to support@hydropoint.com. If you're watching this after the fact, our customer service provides 6-day-a-week bilingual customer support, so you can either email them or call them. If you haven't checked out our training, we have a whole variety of online, on-demand training at hydropoint.learnupon.com, where we have certified training. You can take the test and get the certificate if you're interested. And look forward to seeing you here next week when we are going to do a little segment about the reporting tools and talk about some of the hidden features that you may not know exist in there, and some of the powers of WeatherTRAK reporting. And we will feature our guest next week, Mr. Andy Liebolt, who is the Director of Public Works for the City of Garden City, Kansas. So thank you all for being here. Thanks for tuning in, and we will talk to you next week. Thanks, Marty.
Right, thank
See
you.
everybody.
Thank you, Marty. Thanks for all the questions, everybody. Great questions.
Marty.
Anybody didn't get answered, we'll be sending out answers here shortly. Thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you. Hey, Ben, I just wanted to give a little shout out to Bob, who's our South Florida rep, and he's been doing a great job, and he's always there to help. I just wanted to let you guys know. And Chris, you got an amazing team from the first time we called in to you guys with people responding. I mean, I haven't run across anybody that isn't super professional. Super. So
Thank you. Appreciate the feedback, Marty. Thank you.
Thanks, Marty.
okay, guys. Thank you.
Take care.
Have a good
Good
day,
one, Marty.
everyone.
Hey, you too. Bye-bye.